Welcome to episode 117 of the XrmToolCast. In this episode, Scott and I speak with MVP David Rivard on his newest tool, the Plugin Identity Manager. It's an XrmToolBox tool to help handle the final stage that's involved with setting up your managed plugin identities. So if you have no idea what managed plugin identities are and why you would need them, or what they are used for, this is definitely the show for you. And if you've already created your own, you would want to know about the tool, how you can make your life easier. So even Scott's going to use it. So it's a great learning experience for me because I'm kind of new to this stuff as well, and I hope for you as well. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XrmToolCast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott with the Real to Row. Please stand up. Scott, how's it going?
Very good, thank you, Daryl. Yes, very, very good. Good to see you again. You know, it's doesn't seem like long ago that we were just sitting next to each other.
Yeah, well, it doesn't.
And I was just watching that episode actually where we were there with Chris, and the little bit on the beginning of the video, in YouTube, you kind of hover over and it kind of plays a little clip of it. The clip that it's, I don't know how, like the AI algorithm, I'm sure that it is, decides to do, pick a bit of a clip and then plays it when you hover over, is the bit that you stand up on the chair and then get back down again. So I wasted, I don't know how many minutes just hovering over it and watching you getting on your chair and then getting back down again and then getting back on your chair and then getting back down again. It was really quality entertainment, I have to say. So, just that on its own is worthwhile watching the XrmToolCast on YouTube, I think.
Okay. I was doing the impression of Chris jumping up on his chair, I guess, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, because when Phil Topness came around with the roving mic to win the competition, Chris was there on his chair, trying to attract attention to himself, which he succeeded in attracting attention to himself. So
he did, whether he wanted it at the time or not. He did.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He really in fact, you might say that he really created an identity for himself amongst all of those different people.
Mm-hmm. Cleared his previous identities and really made everyone know uniquely who he was.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Yeah.
Identity's important, isn't it?
Especially when, I regularly have identity crises as well. So, these are important things. Segue. Our
guest today is a repeat guest, David Rivard. He's Microsoft MVP IT architect for the Power Platform, Azure.net. He is also from Canada, so we have one American who is going to do his American right and go vote today. When I'll bring my identity card with me for that, and
now you had that one pre-prepared, didn't you?
I thought about it. I didn't think about it, but yes, and we're talking about David's new tool, the Plugin Identity Manager. If I get that correct.
That's
correct. All right, good. I was going from memory. My memory's starting to fade, so I was like, I think that's what it was, because I was messing around with your API manager already today, and I was like, I think he just filed the same naming convention. So yeah, I'm good at this. So yeah. Oh, anyway, David, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, guys. Nice to see you.
How you doing?
I'm great. Winter is coming to Canada, so we're bracing ourselves.
Winter is coming.
Yeah, we just had our second bout of cleaning up the leaves in the yard. So I don't know if Canada does it all in one fell swoop, but here in Indiana, we get a whole bunch, and okay, we got too much, we got to clean it up, and then a little bit later, oh yeah, well, there's more that fell down. So,
Well, we had a massive, great windstorm yesterday. My power actually was out for nearly 24 hours, so it's fortuitous that we didn't do it yesterday, this podcast. But there was a dude out in the street with his leaf blower, which I thought was kind of like, okay, kudos to him, man against nature. It was, but yeah, there was lots and lots of trees down and everything. I don't know if that happens where you are, David. Do you get power cuts and stuff where you?
Oh yeah, but not that often. But it happens sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine
But
Montreal's
you're in Victoria.
not I'm near Vancouver, but I'm in like an area which you can only get to by ferry, and it's I think there's like basically one little power line that gets to it, and if that gets cut, then everyone's without power. So it's it's not very good.
I didn't realize you're on an island.
No, people have bumper stickers saying it's not an island.
Oh, it's peninsula.
What is it? You can't get, because there's these huge great mountains in the way, so you can't actually. There's no roads that get here. But for some reason, people are really, really, really upset if you call it an island. You know, there's a certain degree of like upsetness that you get to a point where you feel the need to have a bumper sticker, isn't there? I mean, there's a sort of a level of like mild, annoyance, and then great, and then you get to a point. I mean, I don't know where you go beyond getting a bumper sticker. I mean, flags, perhaps. That's probably the next level, isn't it?
Giant yard signs.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's an island. It's not an island.
With the whole kind of American elections, it's probably quite you've got a lot of yard signs and flags and bumper stickers going on right now, I guess.
Yes, it is definitely there. But anyway, let's switch over to the tool here. So the identity manager. I have not played with identity stuff at all. Scott's on the inside of the fence a little bit, being on the Microsoft team, so I'm sure he's had chances to play with them, yell at him, and plead with him, and whatever else with them. And then David, he goes in and creates a tool for it. So that's good, because now I can learn how to use the tool and how it can save me from all the things that you guys had to learn when you figured it out for yourselves. I could just borrow your knowledge, and hopefully so can our guests as well. So what is this tool, and why does one need it?
Yeah, but I think before we even start talking about the tool, I think we should talk about the feature itself, which is the new feature that is the manage identity for Dataverse plugins, which is it's one of the only I could say pro code feature that was announced in the latest release. So I'm always happy to see that there's still investment in these areas. And actually, what this feature promises is that you can develop a plugin, a Dataverse plugin, and you could consume Azure Resource without the need of having any credentials. So if you ever build a plugin that, let's say, wants to consume from a blob storage or for a service bus, you know that you need some kind of credentials. Manage identities will not need any more credentials. You build a trust between your plugin and the resource, and automatically you'll be able to acquire a token and do your job. And what's interesting is this works for any Azure resource that can be that uses Entra authentication. So basically, virtually any Azure resource can be accessed using this technology. So it's very cool on paper, but like anything, when you start trying to figure out the documentation and how to actually implement that, that's where the fun begins, and that's where the tool I developed I think fills a small gap at the end of the process where you needed to basically create a managed identity in a record in the Dataverse and associate it with your plugin assembly. And what they instruct you to do in the documentation is to do like a Postman call, or there's no UI to do it. So I basically just made a UI over these two API calls, and there's it.
It always makes me laugh when you have to use a feature. It's like a rite of passage. It's like unless you can create a Postman call or use the web API, then you're not qualified to use this feature.
It's not for you.
It's like it's like you've got to get through this challenge, and then you show yourself worthy to be able to use it. But I mean, it was just crying out for a tool, and I was watching the space, and I was thinking, is David going to do it? Is David going to, because it's definitely in your.
You picked David out of all the people in the entire world, like that guy. He's going to do it. I'm waiting for him. Nobody else is worthy of doing such a thing.
Every time there's a new feature, I check if there's a Postman call. I will make a tool out of
Yeah.
it, and that's what I did for the custom APIs and the custom API manager and some other stuff. So
If I was a gambling man, which I'm not, I would, I would have put money on it, to be honest. So yeah, it's definitely like when, the custom API thing, and that, again, it was like, there's no decent UI for here. So you just, you and I think you've obviously got a degree of, you look at the managed identity tool and there's a similarity between, so you've got your kind of style for creating these user interfaces inside their XM. So it's like the David branded UI.
But the thing is, I don't want to redo I just take the one I've already done, and I change the lipstick on the pig.
It's like Jonas says, you've got to be lazy. If you're going to be an effective dev, you've got to be lazy. It's like, it's kind of a requirement. But let's wind back a little bit then. So as you were saying, that this feature allows you to call Azure Resources from inside a plugin, and then that means that you can be authenticated against, like, I don't know, Azure Key Vault or a database server or an Azure function or any of these things by using the Entra ID identity that you're calling. And of course, some people might say, well, we've been able to do that for a long time. You could just go and get a bearer token using an HTTP request and da-da-da-da. But when you mention, like, without using credentials, that's, I think that was the key. Can you just sort of elaborate for listeners a little bit more on, what's the challenge with having to use credentials and that old approach of, getting a bearer token?
Like, let's say, for example, let's say I want to consume a secret in a key vault from my plugin code. Then, in one way or the other, you need, if you want to access the key vault, you need either client secret, client ID, or other. But you will need to store somewhere these credentials. So when you where do you put it? You put
key vault.
Yeah.
But wait, how do we call key vault?
To access the key vault.
It's like a chicken and egg kind of scenario. You need a secret to go and get a secret.
Yeah. So traditionally, you can use secure configuration, unsecure configuration in the plugin model. You can use environment variables, but it's not secrets are not a secret anymore if everyone can access it. And there's also all this the ALM, like if you go from one environment to the other, how you manage these credentials. So it's if you have a way to eliminate all these exchange of credential, then you have something that is much more robust. And I think it's way easier once you figure out how to configure it, which is the challenge here.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll get to that. You can kind of take us through the challenges and why you need your tool. I mean, because you mentioned, like, where do you store the secret? And, like, so secure config, obviously that was a sort of like the go-to. That was all, and then there was also like encrypted key, encrypted columns in Dataverse. But like you say, if you've got admin access, then you're going to be able to go and get hold of this stuff. And this is always the thing, isn't it? It's like, how do you manage secrets so that they're not going to get into the hands of people that inadvertently get into the hands of people that shouldn't have them. It's not like you're going to have admins going out and saying, oh, I'm going to go and find a secret, and then I'm just going to nefariously use that. It's more like, to be secure, you just have to prevent, you've always got to look at the weakest link. And if that weakest link is like, well, someone could inadvertently get hold of a secret, then that means if their account was compromised, then that means that compromise, that bad actor can go and get hold of that secret. So yeah, it's certainly plugged a huge gap in terms of what we can now do in an enterprise security scenario, I think. So could you perhaps take us through what happens if I want to use an identity to call, like, let's say, Key Vault? maybe you could sort of run through step by step what's actually happening in the platform, and what are all the pieces that need to be aligned, all the planets that need to be aligned in order to make this happen.
One of the first things you will need to do when you start your managed identity journey will be you will need to sign your plugin assembly with a certificate, and this is for me was I never done that in 10 years I've been developing on the platform. I always use a strong name signing, and maybe it did the job, but now you need to sign with a certificate. And this is quite it's important, because by signing the assembly with a certificate, you will get a thumbprint. And this thumbprint, we'll see later on the Azure side, you will need this and this is what you'll use for the federated credential. And this will authenticate your plugin assembly to the Azure Resource. So this thumbprint is very important. There's some scripts out there to how to create this signature in your plugin. It's a bit complicated. I will not say it's easy. It's a bit complicated. Once you've done it a couple of times, it's kind of easy. And then you will need to create a managed identity in Azure. So you create a managed identity like any other Azure resource. You go on the portal and create managed identity, and you will have a client ID, which you will need later on. To this managed identity, you can then assign any roles any RBAC roles in Azure. So you can give a role in the Key Vault. You can give a role on blob storage, any other Azure resource you want. And then the final piece is the federated credentials. And this is what's a bit complicated in the documentation. You need to I think it's the subject or the issuer URL that you need to put your Dataverse environment ID, the thumbprint, and there's a whole bunch of things to put together. And this is what will authenticate your specific plugin to your Azure resource. Once this trust is established, then you're good to go. And maybe the final part that I did not talk about is the actual part that we do with the tool, which is in Dataverse. You need to create a managed identity record with your client ID, your tenant ID, and then link this to your plugin assembly. So once all of this is done, the pipe is open, and you can consume the Azure resource from your code.
So it's like a two-way trust, effectively. You've got, like you say, you've got that thumbprint, and then you give that thumbprint to the Azure side, and then on the Azure side, you have to give the URL of the organization that you're calling. So both sides need to have something that they wouldn't know unless you've given it to them, and that's what kind of creates that two-way trust between the two. Because you wouldn't want someone just to be able to say, take a thumbprint of a certificate and then put it in, and then suddenly they can call anything inside Azure. You have to make sure that thumbprint is given to the identity inside Azure that you're actually going to use. And then, as long as both sides agree, then it all works. Kind of feels like magic, really.
So those are all the steps that are required. What does your tool do for you? What does it help you with?
Actually, it's at the end of the setup process that I just explained. You need, as I said, you need to create a managed identity record in Dataverse and assign it to a plugin. Right now, there's no UI for that. So basically, the tool is just you can select your plugin. You will have it will say it will give you the opportunity to link to create a new managed identity record. You plug in your GUIDs of the client ID, the tenant. There's also a credential source, which is this is a field. This is I think the values there are used by Microsoft internally for other stuff. I just put the value that is set in the documentation, and you also have the subject scope, which is this is very interesting. You can choose to have, because maybe your Azure resource is on another tenant. So maybe I'm selling a solution to several. You could choose global scope, and I think this will allows you to, if your Dataverse environment is on another tenant, it could access your Azure resource on the inside. I don't know, Scott, if it's still in the preview feature, but I think that's on what it should be.
Yeah, I don't know about that global scope, because I think that's kind of like reserved for a moment for the first party stuff. I think at the moment what we can use, we have to use a specific identity that we're targeting. But what you're saying is really quite an interesting concept, is that with this, if you are an ISV, then what it would mean is that, that problem at the moment when you ship a solution as an ISV, you've got to give credentials. You've got to give somebody credentials in order to access your software as a service, centrally. I don't, some marketing tool or something like that you're hosting in your own ISV instance, and then you've got customers who are accessing that tool through their Dataverse environment. In this scenario, what you could do is you could ship a solution that's got a signed assembly with a thumbprint that is known by you and by the customer, because they've got it in their config. But then as long as you've got the URL of your customers, you could put that URL in your federated credentials, and then you can allow them to call into your environment, because you're kind of, by putting in that URL in your federated credentials, you're allowing them to call in, because they know the thumbprint. They can actually now access your services using that particular identity. So that's quite an interesting concept. But of course, there is a problem that each managed identity can only have a certain number of credentials.
It's 20.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, so that's really that's the challenge you'd have to get around at this stage. You'd have to have some, way of spreading out over a number of different identities.
Multiplexing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or just have 20 customers there that solved it.
Yeah. Only top 20. Oh, we got a new customer. They're better than you are. Sorry.
Bye. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of like having too many kids. Well, we're just at our 5th kid. We love you all, but one of you has to go.
Yeah.
And also the tool, with the tool, you can, one thing that you can do is inspect. Let's say you have already associate with you can go and check your plugin, you can see what is the managed identity associated to it. You don't have any UI on the platform to do that. And also, if you want to change the managed identity on the plugin, you can just choose your plugin and say link to another one or create a new one. So you have full CRUD on the managed identity records within the tool.
So when we were at Community Power Platform Conference, anyway, when we were there, they said the major kind of the hiccup in there is that you have to, that plugin only works in your actual production environment. It doesn't work in the dev environment, right? So you have to, like, when you're building your plugins, you've got to compile it. When you're getting that thumbprint, you've got to have a separate one for production than what you do if you're in a lower environment and maybe connecting to a different org or just not doing it, I guess, in the lower environment. So is that still true? And A, and B, what's the story about doing something like that with just the out-of-the-box pipelines that are a part of the whole Dataverse story?
What you're alluding to, Daryl, is that there is a difference between when you sign an assembly, you can sign it either as a self-signed, where you create a certificate, a self-signed certificate, And so there's no root authority. You know, it's a, you know, the authority is you, and then you can create that thumbprint and you can sign your assemblies using that thumbprint. But the problem is that you can't deploy a plugin that's self-signed and get it to work with managed identities to a production org. You can only deploy it to a development or a sandbox environment, or a demo, I guess. I'm not that I've tried it.
Is the deployment itself that stops it?
Yeah.
Or is it?
So,
exactly. So what's stopping you from taking your production environment, saying, "Hey, this is a sandbox now," deploying it, and then going, "Hey, this is a production environment now"?
I don't know. I'm presuming what will happen is the next time you deploy, if you try and deploy it into production, it will go. No, you
so
can't.
It'll work then. It'll work until you try to update it.
I guess so, but why would you do that? Why would you do that, Daryl? Why would you? You can just
because I can, Scott. I can.
But the thing is what you got to do is you got to go and get a commercial certificate. You know, like so using a root trusted root authority, and then you have to use that to sign your assembly. Now, what that does is that creates an interesting dilemma, which is what I think you were talking about, Daryl, when you're talking about like the pipelines, because what that means is if you are going to export a solution from dev, right, where you've signed your certificate, you've signed your production, signed your assembly using a self-signed assembly, you can't now import that into your production environment. There has to be a step between development and production where you build your assembly specifically for production. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have people who have access to development having access to your production certificate thumbprint. You know, that's not a safe thing, because then you're basically giving everybody the private key. All your developers would have access to your private key of your production certificate. So if you're going to use this in production, at this time, there has to be a build pipeline, which will build a different version for development and for production. So that's how I solve it. Is I actually have at build time in your build pipeline, you build your assembly both for using the development certificate and also with the production. That means you can store your production private key in a secret inside in ADO or inside GitHub and protect it that way. So nobody would need it in order to do it at development time. Developers would sign their certificates using whatever technique they're going to use, either build pipeline or manually using your self-signed certificate. No one cares about that because there's no security concern. But you would need that separate process that does it in a controlled way using the private key of your certificate held securely to create your production version of that solution. So that's the slight awkwardness of it. And that's unavoidable, really, because if you think about it, because if you're going to sign something, you need to make sure that you're using a secret effectively. So the irony here is that we're almost like pushing the problem further downstream.
The next issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the advantage is that at least we can store that certificate, the base 64 encrypted private key of that certificate. We can store that as a secret inside our build pipeline, be it GitHub or ADO. So at least that's the case, whereas it wouldn't be the case if it was in Dataverse, because then we could have admins getting hold of it.
Well, now, David, both you and I know.
Yeah.
That's why we have Scott on here.
But there is also another slight challenge at this time, in that, of course, so your tool, David, basically sets the application ID and the tenant ID inside a record, because that's what it does, right? It creates a managed identity record inside Dataverse. It's solution aware, so you can add it to a solution. And then you associate that managed identity record with the plugin record. There's like a lookup on the plugin that points to your managed identity. Now, therein lies another challenge. Suddenly, you've got the application ID and the tenant ID hard coded inside your solution, because it's a solution aware element. Now, that application ID and tenant ID is likely, or at least the application ID is going to want to be different between your development and your production environments, because you don't want to use the same managed identity for both dev and production, because then you've got a potential weakest links issue there. So in the same way as the build pipeline has to build separately for your thumbprint, your private key of your production certificate, it also has to set the application ID and tenant ID inside the solution for your production environment. So it has to do both of the, there's two things that are production environment specific. For everything in the inner loop, in development, you can share the same application ID, and it's not necessarily a problem. But you would always have to inject that application ID and tenant ID for your production environment, which means you have to have this automated build process running to do that.
And what if you use the tool? Let's say you deploy to the QA and from dev to QA environment, and you with the plugin identity tool, you just go there, and of course it will create an unmanaged layer. But
exactly,
you could change your stuff.
You certainly could. You certainly could do it manually. In the ways you could do anything manually, right? It's the same issue exists with Power Pages, right? For Power Pages, there's site config that is not changeable through deployment settings when you deploy it, because really what it really requires is like an environment variable or deployment settings approach to be able to set it when you deploy it without creating an unmanaged layer. Because that ultimately that's what you're trying to avoid, is creating an unmanaged layer. But yeah, if you're okay with having unmanaged layers, if you've got an unmanaged layer for anything else, then you could manually set it in your production. But of course, that creates you probably want to automate that anyway. You want to have some process that runs a script to do it. And in fact, you can use PowerFX using the pack PowerFX REPL command. You can set it using PowerFX to do that. I've got a script that uses the PowerFX REPL on the pack to add a managed identity and update it. But we're in public preview at the moment, so I hope these things will get easier. Closer as we get to GA.
Cool. So it sounds like we've created a way, right? And the way did not exist before, but we have a way of getting this to work. And so great now is tools like David's that make that to get to that spot easier for us personally in our personal projects. But there is an actual way, Microsoft supported way to go through and do this managed identity, being able to share that within different function apps or different, the one that we keep on mentioning over and over again, because that's the one that we couldn't get around, is how do we access the secure vault when we need the key to access the secure vault? But we need to make sure that we're secure in order to so it's a great catch-22 of all the Dynamics deployments since day one, I guess.
Yeah, and that's when you truly do get you get an identity crisis. But it's interesting that you don't actually have to, although it's called, the feature is called managed identities in Dataverse plugins, you don't actually have to use a managed identity. You can just use an application SPN registration. You just, because you provide an application ID and a tenant ID. And so it doesn't need to be a managed identity.
So David, let's go back to your tool here. How much time do you think it would save somebody? Is it more in just them not having to go figure out the exact URLs and everything else to the whole request message type and all kind of stuff to send in Postman? Or is there other things that make life a little bit easier as well for the users of the tool?
I think it's more the only thing it saves you is the making these Postman calls. And it's also visibility, like if you just want to navigate to your plugins, see what is the managed identity that is linked to it and what are their properties. There's no real UI for that. You can do it. You can use the tool only for inspection of what's been deployed in your system. You don't have to doesn't only work for creating managed identity. Than that, you can create, update, delete stuff. So it's it's a UI on records that are not exposed natively by the platform.
I wish I'd had it when I was working with the feature. I mean, because I built a Canvas app. That's the way I dealt with it. Because the managed identity and plugin assembly are actually tables that you can include inside a Canvas app as a data source. Oh. So I created a Canvas app and just bound plugin assemblies to a gallery, and then I bound managed identities to a gallery, and then when you selected a plugin assembly, it highlighted the one that was the managed identity, and then had a button that said, okay, well, if you want to change it, you just select a different managed identity and you say update. So I had to build it. If your tool, David, was there right from the beginning, then it would have saved me the time to have to do all of that stuff. So yeah, it's really good for that. A real time saver.
And the fact that it's in the XrmToolBox versus being a Canvas app, that's really not.
Yeah.
There's no good sharing story for Canvas apps.
No.
And so outside of snippets and stuff, like in the last episode we had, with the Power Apps tools, or all those little snippets you can copy and paste it with YAML. But yeah, having it shareable and everything else is great. It's also great for me with the first day that I have to go through and do this. Like, wait, how do I do this? Oh yeah, David wrote a tool. I'm gonna go check it out, and yes, I'll utilize that and save myself from having to do all these other steps that I don't have to do.
But it's important to know that the tool, it's only one small part of the whole journey. There's a whole, like on your machine, as Scott says, like the signing, that's a lot of skills you need to ramp up to be able to.
Have you thought of adding like a help section, or just some prerequisites or prerequisites section that lists like, hey, make sure you've done this, here's the doc for it, make sure you've done this, here's the doc for it, and go from there.
One thing I would have liked is, and maybe, I don't know if you guys, you may have an idea, because when you select your plugin, if you try to link, create a managed identity record and link, you will have an error if your assembly is not properly signed. I don't know if there's a way for me to query the tables to know if there's a signature on the particular plugin. I don't think it's possible to know, but if that's a feature, that's one feature I would like to add to the tool. Like if you select a plugin that is not properly signed, I will show it to you right away.
You'd have to download the assembly and then because the sign tool, you've got like sign tool's got a parameter that you can give it the assembly, and it gives you the thumbprint that it's actually signed with. So yeah, you'd have to, because there is a plugin, there is actually an XrmToolBox that does that, right? That downloads the plugin assemblies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but that would be a nice feature, because it is a real gotcha. Because you think, like, I went through this a lot, so like I thought my build pipeline had signed it, and I was debugging it, and then for some reason the mapping didn't work, and it didn't pick up the signed version, it picked up the unsigned version. Because what I do is I put the signing as a script inside the MS build file. Sorry, I put an MS build script step, which points to a PowerShell script that's separate to my MS build. And then in that PowerShell script, I actually dynamically build that PowerShell script using the secret from the pipeline, because you obviously need to put the thumbprint inside the sign tool command. So that can go wrong. And then you get, like you say, David, you get this error just saying, oh, no, that's not signed. And you think, is it really that it's not signed, or is it because I've just not associated the right assembly with the right managed identity record? So things like that would be really useful to help diagnose things. There's another gotcha as well, which you'll get the same error message, that message that you were just talking about, David, where it says your assembly is not signed. If you have a plugin that is already deployed that is not signed, and then you deploy an update to your solution to say, now I'm updating a signed version of it, and I'm also going to associate to a managed identity record, you will get that same error message, because it checks before it imports the new assembly. And so it looks at the old assembly and says, that's not signed. You can't assign it to the managed identity record. So if you're going to update an existing assembly that's already deployed, first you'll need to do one deployment that deploys the signed version. And then you'll need to do another deployment, which actually imports the managed identity and associates it to that plugin assembly.
Spoken like someone that has been burnt by this.
Yes. Days of my life that I will not get back.
Yeah, I mean, you explain it so calmly, go through the steps, and it's very, hey, this is how you solve the problem. Here's my hand. Thank you very much for taking me on this journey. And I know, like, deep down, there was nights, days, or weekends. What? Oh, God! And you know, that's where that comes from, right? And so...
Yes.
People think, oh, Scott knows everything. Well, Scott failed very hard, I'm sure, for many days or hours or whatever to figure this out. And so, yes, now he knows something, but he didn't know it originally, and he had to give up his blood, sweat, and tears to do so.
And that's so true. We have to remind ourselves of that so many times, right? Because you see people in social media doing this and that and this, and it all looks so easy, and you're like, how? And then you forget that it's like, yeah, the hours, the days that they spent on doing that, and you're like, actually, thank you for spending all of that time figuring that out, so I don't need to do the same.
So, David, here's the ask then: is you need to list those prerequisites, and then it's at the bottom say email Scott and how to do it, because that's
no, please don't do that. Please no.
Our homework section that we have is going to go from the homework we assign homework to we assign homework that we don't want to assign, the other person doesn't want to assign. So it's going to be a conflicting homework thing where it's like you have two teachers. One says, here's your homework, and one says, no, don't do that. And so we have to fight over that. But no, that really...
But I think it's something that you could certainly put in the UI. You know, if you do get that error, you could have like a something that just has a little bit of an explainer that gives people. And there has been a couple of blogs on the topic, because you did a blog as well, didn't you, David?
Yeah,
yesterday.
I just had a blog yesterday on the...
Yeah. So we can link to that in the show notes, and people can benefit from everyone's experience.
But one thing I would like to see also is what kind of use case can we like it? Okay, it's good to go get a secret in a key vault, but there's other ways to do that. Is there some particular use case where this technology will be very beneficial?
Well, in the one of the samples that I've done recently, it uses the feature to access an Azure function, and the beauty of that is that you can then, in your application registration, you can then use app roles, enterprise app roles, to secure your Azure function. And so that means that your Azure function then can only be called by the identities that have, like, in this particular example, it's like create checkout basket, or read payments. You know, there's a number of different enterprise roles that I've assigned to the different Azure functions, and so it's the principle of least privileges, and I think that really is what this is all about. It's about being able to give the identity that is calling Azure from your plugin the least amount of privileges that it absolutely needs. And then it's auditable as well, right? Because you can then say, well, who has access to these different services? And you can clearly see, okay, well, that application, because that's associated with Dataverse plugins. So I think it kind of plugs that gap. But of course, you know, that you could also use it for external calling external services, like using a key. You know, if you have some service so Daryl's got a service that you host, and you need a key to call that service, but you want to keep that key secret, you can store that key in Key Vault, and you can go off and get it. And because it's in, you know, when we were talking about environment variables, because one of the challenges with environment variables is that you can have Key Vault environment variables, but you can't actually read a Key Vault environment variable from a plugin. You used to when that feature first came out, but it's now been closed down. So you can't even though you can store an environment variable inside a key vault, you can't access it from a plugin.
It's only from Power Automate.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, in a sense, it's dealing with that problem as well. That's another application for it.
There, you said you could utilize it from Power Automate though.
If you have an environment variable that is of type secret, it's only available from Power Automate. Okay. It used to be. I actually wrote a blog post on that when the feature came out that you could use an environment variable of type secret from a plugin. And actually, I think it's to this day it's my most viewed blog post. But I have a disclaimer at the end saying this is not working anymore. But I keep it there because
it's clickbait now, basically. it's clickbait. David, you've created the BuzzFeed of posts.
I'm not joking.
You could make like a revenue from ad revenue from it.
All you need to do is create a flow that creates a record that puts the data key in there, and then you just call that flow from your plugin, and you still have access to it. That's it.
Very secure.
The door's still wide open.
Yeah, like taking your production environment and converting it to a sandbox to deploy, and then converting it back to a production. Yes, yeah, these are all worthy solutions, Daryl. Definitely.
I didn't say it was a great idea or even a good idea.
It's thinking outside the box. I mean, we all need to do that more. So yeah,
this is how you find all the security loopholes. So
yeah, well, in fact, when we had our guest on who was an ethical hacker, these are all things that you'd have to test out.
Yeah, totally. So, Dave, is there anything else coming down the pipeline? Anything else that you're looking to do that we can hear some beginnings about?
No, I don't have actually. Probably will work on more some PCF controls I have in the back of my head, but nothing specific now.
All right.
So we need to lay our bets now, Daryl. This is the new thing. Betting on what David will put out next.
I just need to go back and see if there's any new things that are coming out that require Postman, and then I'll be able to place my wages, my wager. I mean, yeah. Well, Dave, it was great having you on. Is there, if people have any questions or want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can. I have my blog, which is it's called itmustbecode.com. You can reach me on LinkedIn. You can reach me on Twitter, or I don't know if you guys see the new Blue Sky. It's kind of a replacement for Twitter, where there's more tech. It's a nice social media. I just enrolled yesterday, and it's quite booming. So you can reach me there.
Blue Sky,
on the Blue Sky.
What's it called?
It's actually a butterfly. Yeah, Blue Sky. It's the new thing. I think you're there, Scott. Right. I had you as a friend yesterday.
Yeah,
you're already there, and you don't know.
I don't visit it though, so. Like maybe I need to now. It's like
all right. So apparently XrmToolCast needs to get on Blue Sky now, I guess.
Yeah.
So
it's the next get with the program.
Yeah. Stop being so old, huh? So Scott, that's how our listeners can get a hold of our guest. How can our listeners get a hold of us?
Well, yeah, you can contact us by email, cast@XrmToolBox.com, or on not on Blue Sky, but on X, Twitter, and LinkedIn at XrmToolCast. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe we do need to do the Blue Sky thing, but it's been really fantastic, David, to have you on the show again and hear about your improvements to the tools that you've been building. And yeah, I'm really thankful for this tool that you've built, and I'm going to be definitely using it a lot. And so
thank you so much.
So many demos are going to be using it, aren't they, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
It's funny how WinForms is a lot more accessible to the average person than Postman.
It's funny that, yeah. Well, yeah. It's Postman's great and all, but I think having an XrmToolBox tool is just that's the ultimate.
The ultimate level.
But I'm still amazed that WinForm is still a thing and in 2024.
It's still alive and kicking.
Yeah, it's never going to go.
Good old Microsoft Technologies, keeping it alive. So, anyway, David, it's great seeing you. Have a good one and stay warm.
Take care.
Bye.
See
Cheers.
you next time.
This has been the XrmToolCast with Daryl Rivard and Scott Darrell. Produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@XrmToolBox.com, tweet @XrmToolCast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XrmToolCast page.